Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and I appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and checking out today's video. And like the title said, guys, I want to talk about sort of the brotherhood of bass anglers over 60. Sort of like, just talk to you guys, all you dudes out there that are over 60 like myself here. I've got a few things I want to share with you guys, and it's sort of like a club that we're in a little bit. And also, if you're not over 60, this might give you a good insight into what you have to look forward to as far as, you know, as you get a little bit older as an angler. And I think it's really important to do a video like this because traditional bass fishing is under attack. And a lot of the guys out there that are over 60 have seen the evolution up to this point. So I want to talk and speak to you guys out there over 60 in today's video, and definitely looking forward to getting your guys' feedback on that as well. Also, guys, before we get started, just a big thank you to everybody out there that's taking time to support Intuitive Angling, man. If you guys like the channel here and you want to support the channel, you know, you can subscribe to it free and easy. Appreciate that. Thanks to everybody that takes the time to go into my links in the description of every video and use all my links for your tackle purchases and stuff. I mean, you guys hear me talking about that all the time, but I really appreciate that. Me and my family appreciate that. And we definitely don't take it for granted. And I know it takes a little bit of effort to do that. So thank you very much for the people that have went the extra mile to support the channel. Really appreciate that. Okay, I think I don't want to sound like some old geezer in a rocking chair that's like, you know, reminiscing about the good old days all the time. I don't ever want to be that dude. But I want to talk and I want to speak a little bit to just what it's like to be over 60 as a bass angler in 2025. Because I think a lot of people that are not as old, they're not in this age group, they have missed out a lot. All they understand and all they know is what has happened in their own short lifespan of bass fishing. And there's a lot of reasons why anglers over 60 are yelling at the clouds and they're angry, and you know, you've heard all the cliches about it, you know, about the old dudes, you know, yelling for kids to get off their lawn and all that type of deal, which I don't, because I have an 8-year-old son and I love him playing on the lawn. But I want to speak to a little bit as far as that overall thing here. So to me, one of the brotherhoods, or one of the things that have drawn anglers over 60 closer together, is we have seen what has happened to the sport, especially over the past 5 years. If you're an angler over 60 and you've been fishing for a long time, there's no explanation needed. You guys know what has happened over the past 5 years. And one of the reasons we're all pissed off about it, and that anglers over 60 are jaded about this, is we've seen the de-evolution of bass fishing and the decimation of bass fishing through, you know, technology or quote progress or changing of the times or whatever we're going to call it. And it's never been like that before, because the changes that we have seen in bass fishing over my lifetime of fishing over the past 50 years, there's been very small incremental changes throughout the decades that didn't really have that big of an impact on bass fishing in general. It's like when you look back, ever since I started fishing, you know, there's been evolutions in 2 or 3 different fronts. A lot of it is lure technology evolution. I mean, we have a lot more options, a lot better realistic looking lures, better colors. There's just a lot more out there. So from what you've seen gradually take place over the decades, this has been a very slow process. For example, it's been like in the 70s, you had the old baits like a flip tail worm and a bomber or crankbait or something like that. Rudimentary baits that worked. And then you had in the 80s a little bit, you had some improvements on that. You started getting into a little bit more color variations, a little bit more different options. And the 90s saw, you know, an incremental increase as far as different type of lure categories and technologies, a big influx in soft plastic technology. 2000s, you started getting into a lot of the new techniques, a lot of the advanced jerkbait stuff, the more finessey stuff, all the swim bait rage, all that type of stuff. But what happened in this is that these were incremental changes that didn't really get in the way of what bass fishing really was. And the same with electronics. It's like you went from about the 1975 to about up until about 2000 and early 2000s, you basically had flashers and some two-dimensional sonar, introduction of GPS and that type of deal. But the overall effectiveness of the electronic technology over like a 35 or 40 year period simply didn't change that much. It was straight down imaging, two-dimensional sonar or flasher straight into the boat. There was none of the side imaging, forward-facing sonar, that type of stuff. So again, it was incremental changes. It didn't really make much difference. And the same with like advancements in bass boats. And it was okay. These were changes that were, they were good for the sport. They were healthy for the sport. They didn't take away from the sport. But now we've entered a different universe. And we talk about this a lot on the channel. And this is the reason the anglers over 60 are having such a hard time with this, is the advent of what we've seen the last 4 or 5 years, specifically in electronic technology, has completely changed the face of fishing. And some of the tournament organizations, their embrace of this particular technology that is destructive to our sport, that has created another jaded, attitude of the older anglers, because we've never seen anything like it in terms of like anglers over 60 canceling their Bassmaster memberships or not renewing their Bassmaster memberships because of this opposition to the technology. It never happened before. It never did. And a lot of guys my age, and a lot of you guys that are my age know what you're talking about, we feel that bass fishing is slipping through our proverbial fingers, not with us so much because we're winding our lives down and that type of stuff, but in terms of what the sport is going to be like for the next generation. It simply is not as rich. It's not as fascinating. The mystery and the magic are being depleted from it. That mystical, magical energy of bass fishing is going away, and it never had to do that. It's going away because of technology, and people like myself that are over 60 rail against that because we understand the PowerPoint of fishing lies within all that stuff that we talk about that's being taken away, that unknown, that mysterious part of fishing, having more bad days than good days, having to put in your dirt time to learn seasonal patterns and movements and bass behavior. All that stuff is being swept aside in terms of electronical advancements and different technological advancements, AI, all that type of, and it goes on in fishing. So given all this, that is why guys like myself over 60 years old are pissed about everything, because we have been there and we've done there and we've seen that. And a lot of people don't give age and ageism and, being elderly the credit it deserves for the wisdom that comes with that. I think one of the natural parts of the human experience is the younger generation feels that the older generation doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. They're old, they're geezers, they're washed up, they're set in their ways, and all that type of deal. I felt the same way to some extent. I did have more of a respect for older people than most people because I was raised to respect my elders, and but that isn't shared across the board. And what happens as you get older, and even if you're one of those people out there that goof on older dudes out there and say they're just grandpas yelling at the clouds, as you become older yourself, you begin to understand the wisdom that age brings people. And when guys like myself are screaming at the top of our lungs that something's not right or want to change something, we don't do that for no reason at all. We definitely don't do it for our own benefit because, like I said, we're all on the way out. And, if you're over 60 years old, you're in the twilight years of your fishing and your life for the most part. So what we're concerned about is what is being passed on. And that's one thing that is really missing in youth is youth is focused on here and now and themselves, and they don't really have a lot of ability to envision the future, what that looks like. But for the guys, one of the things I found out about as I get older, it's like you begin to get a camaraderie with people your own age or older, because a lot of the guys that I've competed against in tournaments for 40 years, I've been around these guys forever, and we started out at the same time. And now if I see one of them at a tournament or at the tackle store or whatever, there's like a nod there. It's almost like there's a respect that comes with being old and being there and done that. It's like, yeah, you've been in the trenches for 40 years. I know you've been in the trenches for 40 years, and that is worthy of a nod head and a smile, because you just sort of, it's an unspoken thing that you know about. And that doesn't happen when you're younger at all, but it does happen when you're a little bit older. And another thing that happens when you're older is your perceived, I don't want to say enemies, but the perceived people that you had problems with in the past, like maybe you didn't get along with those people or didn't like them, that all begins to fade away a little bit too. Because I've met several people over the years that we had a few run-ins on the water, for just different type of stuff. But when you see them now, 30, 40 years after that, all that's forgotten. And there's a camaraderie that comes with being older with that. And that's just one of the things that come with it. So I don't know, guys, it's an interesting, this whole thing that we're talking about. It's part of life overall. It's just an interesting study of human nature, and it's an interesting study of life overall as we all go through this experience of life. It isn't easy, guys. Life's not easy. Life is hard. One of the things that you find out real quick is that life isn't fair. There's a lot of injustices in life, and that's what causes a lot of bitterness and resentment as you get older. In any aspect of life, I don't care if it's business or sports or fishing or whatever, is if you live long enough and you experience enough life, you will understand that life isn't fair. And you have to come to terms with that. It's like every single person has to come to terms with the fact that life isn't fair all the time. And that's a very difficult pill to swallow, but you have to transcend that. And it's almost like you have to look at it with a sense of humor, and you have to remove yourself from that emotional attachment to that and just see it for what it is. That's just the way life is. Life, the very essence and nature of life is the experience of every emotion we have as a human. Most people, under most situations, are going to experience every human emotion to some degree. Happiness, sadness, joy, anger, anxiety, frustration, the whole gamut out there. We're all going to experience that. And obviously, we don't want to experience those bad emotions because nobody does. But obviously, they're there for some reason. Fishing's no different with it. But overall, just for you, if there's any younger guys watching this video, I just want to share this with you guys. I was young and dumb and cocky and full of the vigor of life and testosterone back when I was in my 20s. I know what it's like. If you're there, I've been there, I've done that. But things will change. Your life, your viewpoint on life and your viewpoint on bass fishing will change as you get older, because if you're in your 20s and 30s right now and you're firing on all 8 cylinders and you're doing good and you're at the top of your game, you're going to notice a decline. You're going to notice when you start hitting your 40s, you're probably going to need reading glasses to tie on your knots, like you didn't before. You're going to notice as you get in your 40s and 50s that you're not as consistent as you used to be, and a lot of it is because you get set in your ways a little bit, and you don't adapt to changing techniques, which that happens to every single person. There hasn't been a person immune to that. And everything continues as you get in your 50s and 60s and 70s. It's all going to have a set of challenges, and things are going to change. And you're no longer going to be the freaking stud that you were back when you were 25 or 35. It's going to go away. So enjoy that. If you're one of those anglers right now that are under 40 years old, enjoy it. Just really appreciate where you're at, because that is fixing to wind down. It's just part of life. You can't fight it. You can't resist it. It's going to happen, and you can enter that phase gracefully. You don't have to fight it. And one of the most detrimental things to your human development, and I've seen pros do this, is when they fight the inevitable, when they fight the fact that as they get older, they're going to go downhill. Now, I'm not saying they can't occasionally have a good tournament or win a tournament or whatever. Every dog has its day, but inevitably you're starting to wind down. It's just part of the cycle of life. And the people that are over 60 understand that. You start to come to terms with your own mortality. You start to come to terms with the reality of life, and your things that are important to you shifts. And if you're not over 60 years old, it's hard for you to understand that, which that's okay, because every phase of life has something that we have to focus on. And that's, you don't, if you're 25 or 30, guys, you don't need to be focusing on, what's going to happen when you're 60 or 70 as far as your attitude. You need to appreciate and enjoy the moment that you're in right now. And as you get older, appreciate that moment as well, because you're alive. If you're an old dude and you're 75 years old, your appreciation and the experiences you have in life are just as valid as if you're 25 years old. It's just a different phase of your existence. So don't diminish the fact that as you get older, for some reason you're not as valid or as important as somebody that's younger. It happens it happens to most people if you're fortunate enough. Some people are not fortunate enough to live into old age. So a lot of people don't make it to 30 or 40 years old. So appreciate where you're at, guys. Just be kind, be compassionate. Don't start labeling guys over 60 that are grandpa screaming at the clouds just because they're voicing their opposition to that. You'll be doing the same thing. When you get 60, 65 years old, you're going to be bitching and complaining about the same stuff that we're talking about, and your bitching and complaining is going to be valid. And there's going to be intelligence behind that bitching and complaining that are not understood by the younger generation. That's just part of the way life works, which is sort of unfortunate. But anyway, guys, just sort of a little bit off the wall video there. Really appreciate you guys tuning in for it, and shoot me some comments. We'll talk later.